Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're diving into a case from 1917 where Annie Burkett met a tragic end. Her charred body was discovered in open land near a flour mill in Chatswood, exhibiting skull fractures that might have resulted from extreme heat or violent force. What made this case particularly notorious in 1917 was not just the victim, but her transgender husband, Harry Crawford, who was ultimately convicted of her murder. Born as Eugene Falleni in Florence, Italy, the eldest of 22 children, of whom 17 survived childhood. He migrated with his parents to Wellington, New Zealand, 1877, at the age of 2. At a young age, she realized that he was different. Although she appeared female, she felt like a male on the inside. She had frequently run away as a child, seeking work in brickyards and other places where she dressed as a boy. She started calling herself Eugene and left home. Her family made little effort to find her after years of being opposed to her behavior. Eugene then found employment as a cabin boy aboard a ship that plied the South Seas. After spending less than 2 years at sea, he accidentally revealed during a drunken conversation with the ship's captain, a man named Martello, that he had been raised as female. Speaking in Italian, he mentioned that his grandmother had referred to him as a piccolina, which is the feminine form of the word for little one. After realizing his true gender, he was ostracized by the rest of the crew and repeatedly raped by the captain. Eugene was put ashore pregnant and destitute in 1898 at the ship's next port of call in Newcastle, New South Wales. In Sydney, Eugene gave birth to a daughter named Josephine Crawford Falleni and entrusted her care to an Italian-born woman, Mrs. De Angelis, in Double Bay. He adopted the male identity of Harry Leo Crawford, claiming to be of Scottish descent, and visited his daughter only occasionally. Josephine referred to De Angelis as Granny, who told her that her father was a sea captain. As his new identity as Harry Leo Crawford, he worked in Sydney for employers who thought nothing of the gruff, taciturn man's bearing. He held a series of manual jobs in a meat factory, hotels, laundries, a rubber company, and in private service. By 1912, he was a yardman and driver for Dr. G.R.C. Clark of Wahroonga, where he met Annie Burkett. A widow with a 9-year-old son, Annie was a general domestic with the Clarks, but had saved a nest egg. Harry took mother and son on sulky rides and to visit the circus. The courting pair resolved to leave service and set up a confectionery shop in Balmain. Claiming to be a widower, aged 38, son of a master mariner, also named Harry Leo Crawford, Harry went through a marriage ceremony with Annie on 19 February 1913 at the Methodist parsonage, Balmain South. It embarked on a brief, stormy family life. According to Falleni and witnesses from his later trial, Burkett was unaware of his transgender identity until 1917, when a neighbor informed her. Falleni was hesitant to confirm this when Burkett confronted him, fearing she would report him to the police and lead to his arrest. On October 1st, 1917, while young Harry Burkett was away from home, Burkett proposed that they have a picnic near Lane Cove River. Falleni later stated to the police that they had argued after she expressed her intention to leave him. He claimed that during the argument, she slipped and fell backward, hitting her head on a rock. He stated that he tried to save her, but she died within minutes. In a panic over being investigated and exposed as transgender, he attempted to burn the body to prevent identification. Falleni told Burkett's son that she had run off with another man, and a witness from the trial also claimed that Falleni had said Burkett had cleared out. Burkett's body was found in a remote area of scrubland off Mowbray Road in Chatswood, a location that had become increasingly secluded. The medical examiner, upon examining the remains, reported no definite marks of violence and concluded that she likely died probably due to burns, suggesting a tragic and possibly violent end. At the time, the body remained unidentified, leading to a wave of speculation and concern in the community. Newspaper accounts indicated that the police suspected it might be a case of suicide. This theory was bolstered by reports of a woman seen in the vicinity who had exhibited behavior described as strange. Additionally, a small bottle of kerosene found near the scene raised further suspicions about the circumstances surrounding her death. The inquest into her death ultimately returned an open verdict, leaving many questions unanswered. In a somber conclusion, her remains were laid to rest in Rookwood Cemetery, buried in a coffin marked simply as the body of an unknown woman. This grave, devoid of a name, served as a haunting reminder of the unresolved mystery surrounding her life and death, leaving her story largely untold. In 1919, Falleni crossed paths with Elizabeth King Allison, affectionately known as Lizzie, who was over 50 years old at the time. Their connection blossomed, leading to their marriage in Canterbury in September of that year. During the ceremony, Falleni identified himself as Harry Leo Crawford, claiming to have been born in Scotland and listing his occupation as a mechanical engineer. He embraced a fresh identity and sought stability in a committed relationship, all while navigating the complexities of his past. Lizzie, with her life experience and maturity, provided a sense of companionship that Falleni had long sought, allowing him to forge a new path together. After Burkett went missing, her son moved to Woolloomooloo. In 1920, he visited his aunt and shared a troubling experience. After returning from a weekend trip, he found out his mother was gone. His father, Falleni, took him to the Gap, a well-known spot where people often commit suicide. There, Falleni encouraged the boy to throw stones off the cliff and tried to coax him closer to the edge. About a week later, at night, Falleni brought him to a bushy area near Manning Road in Double Bay and asked him to dig a hole. The boy did so, but then Falleni, looking upset, threw the shovel into the bushes, and they went back to the city. These strange actions made Harry suspicious of his father. He also remembered a time when his father, who couldn't read well, asked him to read an article about the shoes of a burned victim, which added to his concerns. Harry decided to go to the police. He was able to identify his mother's belongings, especially her shoes, which Falleni had fixed himself. On July 5, 1920, the police arrested Falleni at his job. He requested to be placed in the women's cells and had been living with a woman named Allison in Stanmore. He asked that his wife not be informed of his transgender identity. His lawyer, Maddox Cohen, did not request bail for him. Burkett's remains were dug up for another examination, but this second autopsy, which included X-rays, did not provide any new information. Her body was eventually released to her family for burial at Warrenora. The police also found and interviewed Falleni's daughter during their investigation. At the committal hearing in August 1920, several witnesses testified, including the dentist who created the false teeth found with Burkett's remains and Burkett's sister, Lily Nugent, who identified a gemstone discovered with the body as belonging to her sister. Burkett's son shared that his mother had only married Falleni because he was very insistent, and after the wedding there were constant arguments, making them unhappy. He recounted how they had left for his aunt's house and then another place, noting how much Falleni troubled his mother, including an incident where Falleni found them and caused a scene. He elaborated on his visit to the Gap, explaining how Falleni tried to coax him over the fence toward the cliff edge. Falleni's lawyer, Maddox Cohen, objected to this part of the testimony about being taken to dig holes, but the magistrate allowed it, reasoning that it revealed Falleni's state of mind. Dr. Palmer, the government medical officer, reiterated his findings from the autopsy, stating he believed Burkett died from burns while still alive when the fire started, based on the blistering on her skin. However, he could not determine if she was conscious at the time. He noted that some small cracks in the skull were likely caused by the fire, but a larger crack might indicate violence. Henrietta Schieblich, who rented a room to Falleni after Burkett's death, testified that Falleni told her his wife had left him. He mentioned, We had a big argument, and I hit her on the head, and she left. She also claimed that Falleni threatened to kill Burkett's son on the night he took him to dig holes. Another witness supported the son's account, stating that Falleni, who couldn't read or write, had asked others to look for news about a murder in the days following Burkett's disappearance. The prosecutor was allowed to treat Falleni's daughter, Josephine, as a hostile witness and presented her earlier sworn statement to the police as evidence. I first remember my mother when I was about 7 years old. She always wore men's clothes and was known as Harry Crawford. I grew up in Double Bay with Mrs. DeAngelis, whom I called Granny. She told me that Harry Crawford was my mother and that my father was the captain of a boat. My mother was often cruel to me as a child and frequently forgot about me. Granny said my mother even tried to smother me when I was a baby. Mrs. DeAngelis passed away when I was around 12, and then my mother took me to a small candy shop in Bowl, Maine, run by a Mrs. Burkett, who had a son named Harry. My mother claimed that Mrs. Burkett had some money and always thought my mother was a man. I warned my mother, saying, "She'll find you out one of these days." My mother replied, "Oh, I'll be careful. I'd rather harm myself than let the police discover anything about me." She insisted that I call her father and not let Mrs. Burkett or anyone else know she was a woman. I didn't realize my mother was married to Mrs. Burkett, but they shared the same bedroom. They often argued, and my mother would come out saying, "More fights over you. I can't get any sleep." I would respond, and she'd say, "Oh, what a lovely daughter I have." I replied, "What do you expect? I have a lovely mother." In 1917, I met my mother, and she told me things were chaotic because Mrs. Burkett had discovered she was a woman. My mother seemed very upset and often reluctant to talk about herself. At the end of the hearing, Falleni was committed for trial and denied bail. A few days later, the magistrate, Mr. Gale, faced criticism in a Sydney newspaper for personally escorting a popular actor and actress into the courtroom and providing them with box seats. Mr. Graham Brown and Miss Marie Tempest, both well-known actors, sat next to the solicitor's table and seemed very interested in the proceedings. Many people attend police courts to watch murder cases and observe the accused, driven by a morbid curiosity that magistrates typically discourage. Sometimes the bench is so disapproving that it admonishes the audience. However, Mr. Gale appears to have a different perspective. He even invites friends and provides them with prime seating for the event. While it's important for justice to be conducted openly and transparently, that's not the main issue here. Although some court rituals may seem outdated and unconvincing to ordinary people, a certain level of seriousness and distance from those administering the law is commendable. A magistrate should respect the gravity of their role. Mr. Gale is undoubtedly a competent and dedicated magistrate, but in this instance he seems to have overlooked the dignity of his position and what it represents. His actions have set a troubling precedent that ideally should not be repeated. Courts should not be treated as spectacles, and casual onlookers should not be granted special viewing privileges. In Mr. Gale's courtroom, Falleni was obscured by a blue screen, while his friends were positioned to see everything clearly. This did not sit well with people. At Falleni's murder trial at the Darlinghurst Courthouse in October 1920, the case, known as the man-woman case, attracted a lot of media attention. Falleni appeared in court, first wearing a man's suit, then changed into women's clothing. The prosecution presented the same evidence as in the earlier hearings, but the prosecutor was hesitant to discuss the relationship between Falleni and the victim, Burkett, saying there were some topics he preferred to avoid in front of women. Chief Justice Sir William Cullen criticised him, stating that if women attended a criminal court, they shouldn't be treated differently. As part of the evidence, the prosecutor introduced a dildo found during a search of Falleni and Lizzie's home in Stanmore. He argued that this showed Falleni was trying to deceive people about his gender. However, not all witness testimonies supported the prosecution's case. For example, David Lowe, who was on his way to work, saw a woman with a suitcase acting strangely. This woman disappeared into the bushes about 200 yards from where Burkett's burned remains were found. Police Inspector Mays, during the initial inquest, even suggested that the body might belong to a woman who accidentally set herself on fire. Falleni pleaded not guilty to the murder, but the jury took only 2 hours to reach a verdict, finding him guilty and sentencing him to death. When Chief Justice Cullen asked if he had anything to say, Falleni spoke with his lawyer before replying, "I have been in Long Bay Jail for 3 months. I am close to a nervous breakdown. I am not guilty, Your Honor. I know nothing about this charge. I was convicted based on false evidence." The courtroom buzzed with the weight of the trial, as many in attendance were eager to witness the outcome of such a sensational case. In mid-October, Falleni filed an appeal against his conviction, arguing that the jury's verdict was not supported by strong evidence. He claimed that the Crown's case was weak and primarily based on circumstantial evidence. Falleni pointed out that the testimonies of the Crown's medical witnesses undermined their case. He also stated that the identification linking him to a person seen near the location of the charred body was unreliable. Additionally, he argued that his nervous condition during the trial prevented him from providing a statement that could have countered the circumstantial evidence against him. The Court of Criminal Appeal rejected Falleni's case, stating that if the original jury believed he was responsible for the woman's death, regardless of how it occurred, they were justified in delivering a guilty verdict. Falleni's sentence was changed to life imprisonment, but the media focused heavily on his gender identity and alleged deception, portraying him as a monster and a pervert. Supporters of Falleni and prison reform advocates petitioned multiple times for his release. In February 1931, after a lengthy visit with Falleni, Minister for Justice Joe Lamaro granted him freedom, citing his nearly 60 years of age and poor health. Upon his release from Long Bay, Falleni was driven away to an undisclosed location. The press raised new questions about the case, as there was still uncertainty regarding the identification of the body as Burkett's, the nature of the skull fractures, the effects of the fire, the possibility of poison, and the lack of conclusive evidence that Falleni had caused the woman's death. In April 1935, Inspector Stuart Robson delivered a speech as he assumed the role of officer in charge of the Broken Hill Police District, during which he reflected on his involvement in the Falleni case. "I was responsible for the arrest of Eugenia Falleni, the infamous man-woman. She was the daughter of an Italian skipper who dressed her in male clothing, and she worked as a cabin boy. She continued to wear men's attire, and her adventures are well known. Falleni was convicted of murdering her wife and sentenced to life in prison. I arrested her while she was working as a man, breaking down rum in a hotel cellar in Sydney 3 years after the murder. I initially thought I had apprehended a man, and it wasn't until she refused to undress that I suspected something was amiss. A doctor later confirmed the truth. She was eventually released and has since vanished completely." Falleni had taken on the name Mrs. Jean Ford and became the owner of a boarding house in Paddington, Sydney. On June 9, 1938, he was hit by a car on nearby Oxford Street and succumbed to his injuries the following day at Sydney Hospital. He was identified through fingerprint records and the £100 he had received from selling the boarding house business shortly before the accident, which was found in his bag. The inquest ruled his death as accidental. Falleni's funeral notice was published under his final name, and he was buried in the Church of England section of Rookwood Cemetery.